Okay, hi everybody. So this talk is titled Design Lessons from Technologies that Revolutionized Warfare. Before we get started, a little bit about who I am, as soon as I can get my screen to work properly. So my name is Peadar Callaghan, and I have been working in Tallinn University for over 6 years. My academic qualifications are I have a master's in history from the University of Dundee, where I specialized in looking at conflict studies and also military history. I have a master's in digital learning games, also specializing in teaching security-related topics. And I'm a PhD candidate at Tallinn University, again, focused on security and resilience topics with the nature of games. I am also a professional wargamer with over 5 years experience as a wargamer. As part of that, you get a very fine understanding of how systems work and how people think in terms of situations and design technologies. I have also written extensively on the design of wargames and also written extensively on the area of design for products themselves. So that's who I am. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be reviewing key pieces of technology that have seriously influenced and revolutionized warfare throughout history. By doing so, we're going to try to use them to provide us with an understanding of what we need to be able to design effectively for a dual-use technology. A technology that could be used either in conflict or resilience, but also has a civilian purpose to it. And at the end, I'm going to give you a couple of design guidelines for those who are attempting to design either a piece of technology or services of the future. We'll also take a little bit of a look at 2 case studies of modern warfare and modern examples of technology on the battlefield. So the first thing that we're going to start with is the most deadly weapon in human history. Now, the instinct that everybody has when you say the most deadly weapon in the human history is to think about the atom bomb, to think about the massive ability to destroy large cities. But when it comes down to the sheer number of people who have been killed by a weapon in history, it's actually been from this, the spear, the very humble spear. And the very humble spear has a couple of things going for it as a technology that we should think about when we're creating dual-use tech. One, it's easy to produce. It's fast and it's efficient to produce. It's easy to stockpile, and the materials are readily available. It can be made from everything from antlers through to wood, stone, steel, whatever technology is available in that region at that time. And this makes it an incredibly useful and versatile tool and weapon. It also allows human beings to multiply their force. The first organized forms of warfare were based on the ability of people to stand shoulder to shoulder with each other and to project their force outward. All of the technology that we're seeking to build is based on that principle. How do we get people to multiply their individual force into something larger? And the spear was one of the very first technologies that allowed us to do this. You could argue that it was the first technology that allowed humans to move from single combat to organized conflict. The other thing to remember about the spear is that it's still in use in different forms today. The modern bayonet is in fact just a spear by any other name. It still uses the same weapons, the same technology, the same approach as our ancient ancestors used. So if we think about it for a second, if we're building a technology, especially for a dual use purpose, the lessons of the spear are that you should aim for something that's capable of being mass produced. It should have a level of familiarity for the user so that the user can actually, doesn't require as much training to grasp what it is that they're doing. Has to be simple enough to use. Designing a bespoke system is not as good as something that somebody can take a hold of and go, I've got it, let's use it, let's move on. It should allow people to work together as a group, and it should also be relatively easy to store and produce as locally as possible. We'll talk about supply lines later on in this little talk. So those are the first sort of lessons that we can learn from possibly the first sort of weapon. The next sort of military revolution we need to talk about is the medieval military revolution. And this was based on one very simple piece of technology, the stirrup. Being able to sit on a horse, being able to use a horse to increase the speed and ability to move quickly, efficiently, and to keep your seat in the middle of a combat. Revolutionized technology and revolutionized society as well as combat itself. Increased mobility increases your ability to communicate. And communications is one of those key areas that all of the dual-use technologies should be thinking about. How does this support communication? Does it support communication? Another key area is it increased the ability to gather intelligence, to scout, to be able to find the enemy and figure out where they are. Because if you can't find the enemy, you can't fight the enemy. So this technology itself allowed people to move faster, communicate quicker, and it opened up new tactical options, including the ability to charge with lances. All of these things coming from a very simple piece of technology. But that simple piece of technology that came to Europe via the Arab states revolutionized European conflicts so much that it led to the creation of Charlemagne and the First Holy Roman Empire. Simple tech is good tech. And this is something to make sure that you think about as you're designing. Keep it simple. Where is the use case? The next thing to talk about is there's an old adage. Amateurs think about tactics. Professionals think about logistics. One of the most revolutionary pieces of technology that has ever been created for combat is this. It's a humble tin can. Why is this revolutionary for combat? Well, it made sure that you could feed people. Because if you can't feed them, they can't fight. More people in conflict zones die of either malnutrition, lack of access to clean water, inability to get medicine, or diseases that are brought about by bad sanitation. The use of tin cans increased the ability of sailors and soldiers to go further and longer, and is incredibly important. To the point that some historians have argued that the primary reason why the Allied forces won World War II was not tactical brilliance, not military technology, but their ability to move food. If you can't feed the people, they can't stay in the action. If you can't transport the food while it is still fresh and usable, you have a serious problem. And this is not an academic thing. This is not a problem that's going away anytime soon. The movement of material is incredibly important to think about. So much so that one of my favorite chefs, this guy Heston Blumenthal, has a very interesting TV show called Heston's Missions Impossibles. And in one of them, he was brought on board a UK nuclear submarine. And he was asked to see about updating the type of food that they had. He came up with the concept of cooking all the food on shore and then vacuum packing it so that it was easier to take and use and required less space to bring. This could, in theory, increase the amount of time that a nuclear submarine could stay out away from port, which was of incredible interest to a military group. When you're thinking about your technology, don't neglect the food, the water, the essentials of life. The next thing to think about is two very, very simple pieces of technology. Number one, the watch. And number two, the telescope. Believe it or not, the first maritime watch was developed specifically as part of a dual-use technology competition. It was developed to help solve the problem of longitude. Yeah, making sure I said the right one, it is longitude, not latitude. So the problem was that you had to be able to correctly measure the time so that you could figure out how far east or west you were. If you don't know where you are, it is very hard to see what's going on. It is almost impossible to coordinate action between a group of people if they are incapable of knowing the time that they are supposed to be taking the action. The telescope as well allowed people to see the enemy or see things before they were seen. And again, this becomes incredibly important to think about. How does your technology support the ability of somebody to see over the hill, as Wellington used to put it, to predict something that is not readily apparent? How well does it help people to understand where they are and where somebody else is in relation to them? How well does it help them to communicate between each other? All of these things are incredibly important, to the point that the creator of the very first longitude clock ended up making a small fortune and also being given a title of Lord, I believe. The last thing to think about is training. And this is one of those areas which speaks very highly to my heart because I want to talk a little bit about wargaming. If you want people to be prepared for a situation that they have never been in before, you have to give them some practice. You have to allow people to try to understand a situation through being in something similar. And we do that through a variety of exercises and war games. The example I have over here is from Kriegspiel, and it's from the 1780s, 1790s. And since that time, militaries have relied on games and gaming as a primary training methodology. So if you're designing, for example, a service specifically for dual use, think about how you can game it to encourage people to onboard efficiently and effectively. Stop and think about what is the nature of the game that you're giving and dealing with. If you want a man to keep his head while all others panic, you've got to give them some practice. How do we practice? This is a fundamental question that is both military, civilian, and extremely in the field of resilience. So let's talk about a couple of the design principles. The first one that I'm going to offer up to you is that you need to address at least one of the key military needs. And you have to define which key military need you are looking at. Are you looking at logistics? Are you looking at intelligence, communication, mobility? What is it that your good or service helps to bring to these fundamental problems? Because they are fundamental problems that are not going away. We just have slightly better solutions as we move through history. You've got to keep it simple. Simple to produce and store beats complicated and difficult. Those of you who have studied World War II will point to Hitler's wonder weapons, the Tiger tank, a phenomenal piece of technical engineering. The problem with it was that when it broke down, there was only one factory in the world that could repair it. In contrast, the Sherman tank from the Allies, when it broke down, you could rip 3 parts out of the Sherman next to it in the field and repair it instantly. Complex tech breaks down easily. Keeping it simple, keeping it usable. We want civilians with lots of experience so that it cuts down on the necessity to onboard people. You want people to have familiarity with the type of control system, the ability to use the work, and all of those elements so that you can quickly bring people up and through the system to make sure that they understand what they're doing. This cuts down on the amount of training you need to do and can increase the resilience and the depth of ability of users. And fundamentally, successful technologies act as force multipliers. What this means is that they help people to do something better. Be it to find something faster, to understand where they are, to eat better, to be able to do any of those sort of things, to move quicker. All of those technologies are all based on that fundamental core of getting people and supporting them to do better and faster. Okay, so let's take a look at some modern examples. Drone systems. The first picture up there in the top corner is the controller. Anybody who has played any Xbox or PlayStation in the past ever many years will see that this is very recognizable. And this is deliberate. They're taking that principle that I was just talking about of making onboarding faster and easier by leveraging technology that people are familiar with. The next one over is that lovely little drone scout system. And that's just a modern example of the stirrup. It is fast and quick moving and able to scout and get communications efficiently. You're able to put it up, you're able to take it down quick, you get the data and you get out. Scout and run. This is the modern equivalent of the horseback scouts of the Napoleonic era. If we move over into the logistics side, we already see civilian applications of drones in logistics. We have that lovely Starship model down in the corner there. which delivers things around a city. How fast could you adapt that same tech to be used to deliver water, medical supplies, ammunition, anything like that? Again, the dual-use technology doesn't always have to be a technology that is specifically designed for dual use. It can be a technology that you recognize that with a little bit of adaptation, it could be applied. Beside the Starship drone, we have a Ukrainian autonomous weapons platform, which have been used during the Ukrainian conflict. They are mini tanks, drone tanks, where the operator is well behind the front lines, but capable of doing the actions. And the one that is over the last picture, that white one, is also a Ukrainian drone system, but it's a medical evacuation drone. So it's used to take servicemen who have been injured on the front lines and bring them out of the conflict zone or out of the area while not putting trained soldiers or medics or doctors at risk, because those workers are much more valuable if you can keep them safe. You lose the drone, it's no big deal. You lose the medics, you're probably in a little bit more trouble. The other thing is that it serves a double purpose. It can also be used to transport essential materials out to conflict areas in such a way that you're not risking human life. So that's modern example one. Drones, which are going to be a huge part of any conflict from now on, have all of these principles being used in them. The next one is to think about open source intelligence. What information can we find out about an opponent via social networks, via their phone, via whatever? And this is where the apps and the app use for dual-use technology becomes very important. There are examples coming out of the Ukraine of using Tinder to get targeting information out of enemy troops. There are examples of using Facebook and other things to manipulate and control. So we need to start thinking about our digital footprint as well as our physical footprint. But again, this is just an extension of all of the technology that we have had since the spear. And at that point, I have reached my allotted time, so I will throw it open to questions. If you would like to talk to me in person, you can reach out to me at my email, at my work email address, or you can find me on LinkedIn, and I will throw it open to questions in the chat now.